You walk into a crowded room and feel your body adjust, your voice, your laugh, the urgency to exist. Who are you when no one is watching? And who do you become when everyone is? Today, our conversation moves through Rousseau, Discourse on the Origin of Inequality, Nietzsche, The Gay Science, and Charles Taylor, The Ethics of Authenticity, Three Open Windows, 3 centuries apart, one shared unease. We want to be ourselves, but we like the role that works. It feels like a contradiction. It's just life on stage. This question isn't a social media trend. It has followed humanity all along. Between what we feel and what we show, there has always been a stage. Social life needs roles, labels, prefaces. They bring order to encounters and protect coexistence. But sometimes the role grows too big and the face shrinks. No one lives without personas. The problem is forgetting who's in charge. When the mask commands and the body obeys, the cost is high. You feel it. The air gets thin. Rousseau offers a map to name this drift. He distinguishes amour de soi, a basic care for oneself, from amour propre, which measures self-worth by someone else's yardstick. When the second dominates, life turns into a constant contest. You walk into a meeting and speak less, not out of prudence, but out of fear. How many times have you stayed silent? Not because words were lacking, but because comparison was overflowing? You don't want to seem smaller. The heart bends to another's gaze, and the inner compass shrinks. Rousseau's lens reveals the mechanism. Comparison has taken the wheel, and it hurts. There's a famous image that lights up this scene. Rousseau writes, "The first man who, having enclosed a piece of ground, thought of saying, 'This is mine,' founded civil society." That gesture marks a symbolic fence that never goes out of style. Today, the fenced ground is called job title, brand, follower count, a room full of compliments. Could it be that, without noticing, we've fenced life into a display instead of tending the inner garden? Likes and status build the fence. The risk is not owning possessions, but being possessed by them. The public display grows. The inner mirror fades. The self begins to feel exposed. Recognizing that drift doesn't have to make us cynical about society. It's about a recovering agency. Ask yourself, quietly, am I adjusting this gesture out of real care or out of fear of losing value? That answer changes how you choose and what you can sustain. Prudence protects. Ego imprisons. Once we name things, the fog lifts. A short phrase is enough to keep. Fear shrinks when it has a name. Sometimes what's missing is not grand courage but an honest vocabulary for our own theater. Nietzsche dismantles another common illusion, the idea of a pure natural self, buried under layers of falseness, waiting to be unearthed like an intact relic. For him, our identity is a work in progress, a struggle of forces, a possibility of self-creation. If identity is creation, what have you been sculpting in yourself? It's not about removing all masks, but about choosing roles that reveal, personas that don't conceal but embody. Think of style not as vanity but as a way of telling the truth with one's life. Crafting such a life is an artist's work. Within this horizon, Nietzsche's famous phrase resounds as a sign of the times. God is dead, and we have killed him. What he points to is the loss of easy guarantees. Without ready-made tables to justify every gesture, we are pushed into authorship. It's frightening, of course, but it's also freeing. And what if the absence of guarantees is precisely the space where your voice is born? If I can't hide behind, "It's always been this way," I must decide what form of life I want to sustain. The stage remains, but now the script demands less imitation and more composition. That path is demanding and beautiful. Bring this to an ordinary day. You notice your speech at work has become watered down. You repeat safe terms, uncontroversial opinions, metaphors that say nothing. Instead of discarding the role, Nietzsche would invite you to give style to it. The identity remains, the form changes. You bring in a real example. You respectfully take an unpopular stance. You slow down when it matters. Here's what a revealing role looks like. The persona becomes a tool for truth, not a way out. But there are limits and misunderstandings to avoid. Self-creation is not permission to harm. Style without measure becomes exhibitionist noise. The invitation is different. Align inner forces, values, and consequences while respecting the presence of others. We don't need to cut ties with everyone to be authentic. We need to choose, one gesture at a time, what reveals and what merely impresses. The difference is subtle, and over time, it becomes a second skin. You recognize it. Breathing gets easier. Charles Taylor stitches the two threads together and warns, authenticity is lost when it refuses any reference beyond itself. To avoid becoming, "I feel it, therefore it's right," it needs horizons of meaning and recognition. This doesn't mean blindly obeying traditions, but dialoguing with them. We are shaped by languages, memories, histories. Choices gain weight when they stay in conversation with that fabric. When they claim absolute independence, they slip into whim. And whim is exhausting. Taylor formulates something precious. Authenticity is not the enemy of external demands. It presupposes them. Isn't it curious that we only discover who we really are when we engage with what precedes us? Translated to daily life, you can be faithful to yourself and still respond to values that precede and sustain you. Care, justice, attention, beauty, responsibility. I don't invent everything from scratch. I respond, update, incorporate. That's where synthesis arises. From Rousseau, the vigilance against the trap of comparison. From Nietzsche, the courage of form. With Taylor, the sustaining dialogue. What does this sound like on a weekday? You need to hold a leadership role but hate the theater of the infallible boss. Instead of quitting the job or putting on armor, you choose an expressive role. You create listening rituals. You admit specific gaps in knowledge. You stay firm on essential principles. The role stops being a disguise and becomes a tool. The team notices. The climate shifts. Recognition is not cheap applause. It's the convergence between what you stand for and what the environment needs. Let's turn to simple, safe, non-clinical exercises. First, an inventory of expectations. Which expectation are you willing to drop this week? In 10 minutes, list 5 external expectations weighing on you. Mark 1 you'll honor, 1 you'll adjust, 1 you'll abandon. Turn each decision into a small weekly action. If possible, ask for feedback from someone trustworthy without defensiveness. Second, a contradictions journal. 5 minutes a day is enough. Note one of your inconsistencies without guilt. Promised to leave early but stayed. Defended kindness but was harsh. Ask, was it prudence, laziness, fear, or value conflict? One line of response is gold. Third, micro-exposure to discomfort. Once a week, choose a small act of autonomy. Saying no kindly, bringing up a forgotten agenda, holding silence when the urge is to over-justify. No need for speeches. One gesture is enough. The goal is not to defeat fear, but to show it you have a body. Fear loses ground when you move, and you move better when you know why. Fourth, the expressive role. Choose a part you cannot abandon: work, family, community. In 3 lines, write down what in it could become expression. Tone of voice, rhythm, examples, humor, pauses. Adjust 1 detail per week. In 2 months, you'll notice it's not the role that traps you, but the habits within it. An expressive role is freedom with form. Fifth, horizons of meaning. In 2 columns, jot down values that matter and where they show up in life: care at home, justice at work, beauty in art, transcendence in nature, curiosity in study. Then answer the Socratic question: what does this ask of me today? Now, let's face some common objections. Authenticity is just an excuse for selfishness. It doesn't have to be. Authenticity without dialogue slips into solipsism. Authenticity with dialogue seeks coherence that doesn't step on others. Masks are always false. Not always. Roles can lie, but they can also reveal. When chosen with care, they bring what matters into view, like a frame that highlights a painting. Without the frame, sometimes the image gets lost. Another objection: Nietzsche authorizes everything. No. Style without measure turns into noise and wounds. Careful listening gives form and consequence to creative force. If your gesture feeds on humiliation, it turns back on you. If your gesture seeks clarity and responsibility, it matures. The rule is simple and old. Freedom isn't doing whatever you want. It's taking responsibility for what you do. Respond calmly, without pride. It's practice, and practice reshapes us. You might ask, how do I sustain this practice in hostile environments? We won't always receive fair recognition. Sometimes the setting is violent. In such cases, authenticity may mean preservation. Adjust the dose. Choose your battles. Set escape routes. There's dignity in survival. There's wisdom in preparing the ground for small, steady changes. The goal is not to become a hero. It's not to lose yourself completely. Small joys are already victories. Picture this. You stand before a mirror and a display. In the mirror, you see yourself. In the display, you sell. We need both at times, but reversing the order does damage. First mirror, then display. First compass, then applause. When applause comes before the compass, you become hostage to the next noise. When your compass sustains the gesture, applause becomes a bonus. Silence, a quiet peace. Simple to say, but hard to live. And that's normal. Remember this: authenticity is not brutal honesty. It's not dumping whatever you feel without care, as if truth were the same as raw discharge. Truth needs form. Form needs time. Time needs patience. When you give your words time, they become fairer. When you give your pain form, it stops scratching others. It's not censorship. It's care for what is shared. That, too, is an ethical stance. On the way, shame shows up. Shame of having performed for years, of having believed in displays, of having been harsh with yourself. Keep this in mind. Shame can also become a teacher. It points to the spot where you want to do differently. Thank it for the sign, then move on. Change comes slowly. The rush to be new can turn into another persona. Change one thing at a time. Choose small rituals. Celebrate what no one sees. That's where life grows roots. If you're rehearsing a difficult conversation, remember Nietzsche. Give style to what is necessary. If you detect toxic comparison, remember Rousseau. Recover the inner compass. If you lose your sense of the world, remember Taylor. Return to dialogue, to horizons that sustain. Authenticity is this back and forth between inside and outside, silence and word, gesture and pause. You don't have to win every day. You just need to show up. Show up with honesty enough to learn. One responsible note: this is educational content. It does not replace professional guidance. If suffering is intense or persistent, seek specialized help. Authenticity is also recognizing when we need support. No one crosses everything alone. In the presence of someone safe, the mask falls without humiliation, and the face learns again. That's not a weakness. That's maturity. And maturity is quiet. It helps. Back to the beginning. You walk into the room again. The body adjusts its step, but now you know why. You choose the tone, pace yourself, sustain a disagreement, hold back an excess. It's not theater. It's care for the shape of the encounter. The persona slips a little. The face breathes. You don't shrink to fit. You don't shout to exist. Between the mirror and the display, there's a work table. There you write a biography with less fear and more authorship. What lines would you write today if the draft were yours alone? Before we close, 3 short reminders for your pocket. First, name the impulse. Naming reduces fear. Second, choose a role that reveals, not one that hides. Third, remember the horizons. Dialogue sustains fidelity to oneself. With these 3 keys, the door doesn't turn into a wall. You open it slowly, breathe, and walk through. One day at a time, one word at a time, one honesty at a time. If you like, start today with the expectation inventory and contradictions journal. Tomorrow, the micro-exposure to discomfort. This week, the practice of the expressive role. This month, review your horizons of meaning. Observe without cruelty. Adjust with patience. Share when it feels right. There's much beauty in turning the stage into a place where life speaks quietly but clearly. You'll understand, and those who cross your path will too. We end as we began, with a crowded room. Only now, you know the scene has direction. The script isn't finished, but the tools are in your hands. The rest is path. A path without unnecessary noise, but with firmness. You walk, the role serves, the face remains, and the heart learns to breathe on its own.